talking to you guys about Riven runes in Season 10 and Pre-Season 10 as of right now. As you can see in the bottom right, it's patch 9.23. So I'm going to be going over some runes that you can expect to see in most of your games, and I'll be going over the runes that I run and in the situations that I run them. If you have any specific questions after the video, after you watch the video, such as which runes to run in certain situations, or a certain champion that you've been having trouble with that you want to be able to do a little bit better against, let me know in the comments below. But yeah, so basically my standard page on Riven is going to look like either this or this. And I'll be going over why, and I'll be going over every possible build that I could see somebody building, or maybe runes that I could see people taking or have seen people take. And now granted, most of the runes that I see that I'm going to be talking about are going to be platinum or above. So for pretty much every Riven player that I see right now that is in any high level or low level of play, Conqueror is the rune that you take at pretty much all times. And the reason for that is because once you fully stack it, which doesn't take very long considering that your fast combo can charge it up pretty quickly, and if your fast combo somehow doesn't charge it up all the way, meaning that you canceled an auto or something like that, you still have your stun and your E, and also, you know, your auto attacks do get 2 stacks each. So you get this because of not just the healing, but also because of the amount of damage you get. You get adaptive force per stack on top of, you know, your passive giving you AD together. So altogether, you actually gain a lot of stats for this. And in extended fights against champions like Aurelia and things like that, this can be the difference between a win and a loss here. So that's the reason that I take Conqueror. I don't take anything else at this time, but yeah. Triumph is just what I take here because you obviously can't even use Presence of Mind in any way. And then Overheal is okay if you're doing the AD or crit build, which I don't really ever do. Right now my standard build is going to be Caulfield's Warhammer into Kindle Gem into Black Cleaver. And yeah, so I don't really see Overheal being that great. But if you want to do some kind of like Ravenous Hydra DD build, then I guess maybe you can do like this. Because if you're taking this, then you should take this as well. But I see Triumph as good because you can get 1v2s, you can do them a lot easier, and you can also be less susceptible to getting ganked immediately after you kill somebody. And on top of that, once you're in team fights and you are killing people, you're going to want to get that extra health so that you can continue in the fight, rather than having to be after the first onset of the fight. And it will also open you up to taking objectives a little bit easier once you get the health back from the fight, so you are actually not forced to back all the time after a fight. Triumph is basically the strongest, and there's a reason that Dangerous Game, which was a similar rune ever since it got changed, there's a similar reason why Triumph is constantly used. So, moving forward, we have Legend Alacrity and Legend Tenacity are the two that I take every time. I have 0% of the time taken Bloodline. Like I said, if you want to do a crit build or some kind of like lifesteal build or something like that, you can. But the reason why I take these two is because they give initial stats. You get 3% attack speed and 5% tenacity off of the beginning. Whereas Legend Bloodline doesn't give you anything until you start stacking it. So early on, it's actually extremely weak. And most of the time that you're going to want lifesteal is going to be in the lane to get through the laning phase. Because if you get strong outside of the laning phase, tenacity or attack speed would be much better than lifesteal, unless again I said you're going like a certain AD build or something like that, with which these stats are extremely valuable. But since I don't really go those builds yet, I just go to something that looks like this or this every time. So for me, it's between tenacity and attack speed. So if you're against a champion like Kali, Aurelia, something like that, it's like a skill matchup, Fiora, I think that attack speed is better. If you're against a tank like a Garen, a Darius, something of that nature, I would take tenacity. If you're against something like Jace or something that's really oppressive like Kennen, I would say probably tenacity for Kennen and tenacity and alacrity for Jace. You know, it just really depends on why they're so oppressive. A champion like Quinn isn't really oppressive because of the amount of CC that she can put down, and she's actually really oppressive because of the range and the fact that she can cut you forever. So the attack speed, once you get inside, would actually help you because you really need to kill her if you're gonna go in on her, because she can disengage and engage better than you in lane. So yeah, most of the time I would say go this and then just get Merc Treads if it's really that bad tenacity wise. But every now and again it's not bad to go this. It actually really strongly just not only depends on the lane but also the comps that they're running as well. And now for the final rune in the precision. I either go last stand or coup de grace. Most of the time, I would say I go last stand. I think last stand is very, very strong right now. Obviously, because you can get that 11% increased damage, and every Riven player knows that 30% health is actually not that low at all for your amount of health. 30% is actually pretty decent, considering if you still have your shield and your stun up, you can beat most champions at 30%, and you get 11% increased damage on top of Conqueror, on top of your passive. I mean, it's going to give you a lot of damage, and most of the time I find myself not even needing coup de grace because my ultimate is already killing people at super low health, and also my kit, just because I'm a strong champion, and by the time they get to low health, you usually have good stacks of Conqueror, so it doesn't really matter. And especially, when you get that level 1 or level 2 trade in, and you guys are both kind of low, you don't really need coup de grace, because, there's very, very few times where you're full health and they're low. You're usually mid to low and they're low, unless you've been trading like expertly well. I just find last stand to overall be the better choice, and plus when you're again in team fights later on in the game, I think last stand is going to help you a lot more, especially if you're against a team that will poke you out, which is very easy to do, being as though you're Riven. So if your flash is down, things like that, being low in health is good, and plus the fact that 8% is the ceiling for this, whereas 11% at 30% health is not bad at all. So my standard page usually looks like this or like this every time. Now, moving forward, we have magical footwear, and the reason why magical footwear is so good is because of that extra 300 gold that you're spending on your boots, not having to spend that, and if you get good enough, you're usually going to have at least 2 takedowns, which means that you get your boots at 10.5 minutes, and if you get 3, you get them at 9 minutes and 45 seconds, and you have to spend 0 gold on them, whereas this will save you 600 gold way later on in the game. This is obviously not going to be used. These two, you don't really need. For the most part, you can sustain just fine in almost every lane just by playing the lane the way that you should. And out of these 3, I think Cosmic Insight is just so good on Riven because you get that extra 5% CDR and 5% max CDR. So that 40 to 45%, you actually just get that for free with this rune. It just gives you that extra 5% for free. And yeah, obviously, Summoner spell cooldown is super important because having flash up as Riven is really huge. And then the item CDR is, it's kind of whatever, because most of the items that you're going to be using don't have any cooldown anyway in almost every build that you have, so it doesn't really matter. Now, this is where you're going to be seeing things that are a little bit different from maybe your page, is I take cooldown, adaptive force, and either armor or magic resist, and sometimes I'll take health, and the way I take health is, let's say they have 4 out of their, let's say they have an AP support and 4 AD champions, I'll take health and then I'll just get Ninja Tabby, and then I'll get a Hex Ranker later on in the game, and so that I have enough, and then I just, so the extra scaling health, you don't really need to build a resistance if their entire team is basically one kind of damage source, but if it's not, then you can just go armor to get whatever your laner is. I would say choose that one. So most of the time I'm going to be choosing armor in the top lane, even unless I'm against tanks such as Shen or Malphite or something like that. I'm going to be going MR, and it's not the reason you think. It's actually not because of their damage. It's because of the fact that they usually build Sunfire Cape. So against Poppy, again, I'm going to be going this 100% of the time, because it actually mitigates most of the damage of Sunfire Cape and allow me to at least live in my lane for a little while. So now that we have the main runes that mostly everybody is going, I'm going to be showing you for each different section, what people might be taking. Let's starting with Domination, just because it's the closest. I say the only 2 that I could really see people going would be Dark Harvest or Electrocute in any way, but that's only for more of a Riven jungle setup in which you want to burst. Even there, Predator might be fun if you're just trying to have fun in a game. But I would say most of the time, if you're trying really hard and you want to really win no matter what, I just think that these aren't good late game options, especially because of the fact that Lethality Riven is just not really that good right now. So basically whatever you do in here is just going to be suboptimal. However, if you were to take any of these, I'll just take one by random. I would definitely take either Taste of Blood or Cheap Shot as sudden impact. If you're going to go full lethality build, then you really don't need more lethality. What you need is to heal so that you can have sustain. I would probably go Taste of Blood, and then Eyeball Collection, and then Ravenous Hunter, because Ultimate Hunter, you're already going for extreme cooldown in almost every build that you're using, so going this doesn't really make that much sense. Movement speed, you already have so much mobility with your ability, so I don't see doing that, and obviously we're not using a bunch of active items, so Ingenious Hunter just doesn't really make sense to me. Now, if I was going to be going this build, I would take that as my secondary, because you don't need 45% cooldown in the jungle as much, because obviously you're not spamming your abilities to trade in lane, you're using them to jump on top of somebody once you gank. So I would choose this because I'm getting free AD and cooldown reduction, and then I'm building a bunch of cooldown reduction items because of my jungle item being a cooldown reduction item, because of Black Cleaver afterwards, because of Death's Dance. Almost everything I'm building has to do with cooldown reduction, so I'm going to be using all that CDR. Instead of wasting it, I'm getting AD for it now. So that's pretty good. Now moving on to Sorcery. I think Sorcery is probably the weakest one for Riven, and actually has the least ability of being used. However, there is a Platinum Riven main that I talk to actively that has a page in Sorcery, and he takes the following. Now, I know that this is something that I would never run. However, he said against oppressive matchups such as Jace or Kennen, this actually isn't bad because you're able to use that extra movement speed to get away from them. In my opinion, if you have to do this and basically neuter your damage throughout the game, I would just say if it's that bad to where you can't play the matchup that bad to where you have to completely change up everything, I would definitely say just pick another champion until you learn that matchup better, or play a bunch of normals, or play against somebody of similar skill that you're friends with in top lane until you can get that matchup down. Because I just simply think that this is not a good setup for Riven, and overall doesn't help. However, I will say in some matchups, using Nullifying Orb as a secondary rune is actually really good, because it gives you a considerable amount of shield, and it lasts for 4 seconds, and it's only a minute long cooldown, so that actually comes up pretty often in trading. Especially when you have Last Stand and this, there's actually a synergy that below 30% health you get a magic shield and you get an extra 11% damage. So that's something that I would use against again, an oppressive matchup. And so yeah, that rune page might look something like this. You could take that, or you could take this. Either one, depending on what your build is. Normally I'd probably take Transcendence, but I think that might make sense there. But as a primary, I just don't see these making sense anymore. Comet used to be a decent go. I just don't think Comet makes sense anymore. But yeah. So moving on to Resolve. I played against a Riven the other day when I was Renekton, and they took Aftershock. And I just think taking Aftershock or Grasp, at that point again, like I said, pick another champion, because you're just not getting enough damage off. You're not it's not like you're a Fiora and you just get random true damage and movement speed and all these free stats just in your kit. You have to use your runes to get damage, because the items that you're building, obviously you're a bruiser now, and that's the strongest way to build her. I just think going Aftershock or Grasp, you're giving away too much early presence, especially if somebody picks Renekton. I know he was obviously doing these runes because he picked my Riven, so I counterpicked him, and it just doesn't really make sense from his standpoint to take these. Because yeah, it's better for trades, early on in the game, so you have a way better early game, but your mid to late game is severely lacking. And let's say you use these and get ahead. If you would have just used Conqueror and get ahead, you're actually way more of a threat than if you have these. Now, it's not like these are awful or terrible, but they just take way too much stats away, whereas Conqueror, you would be so much more of a threat, and again, you'd be so much stronger and being able to steamroll harder. So I really just think that Aftershock or Grasp of the Undying, while they are somewhat viable, they're just very suboptimal to the main page that I showed you earlier. However, I will show you guys, if you want to take either one of these, you go this route, or I would say you could go this route. See, you can go this, but obviously most of it is, it kind of has synergy with Shield Bash. I just think that Overgrowth is just a better rune for your late game, because Shield Bash is already giving you just damage on top of your shield, so I could see something like that. But I mean, for your secondary here, it could be really anything, so I just don't think this is a good page. However, what I saw him go was this. So yeah. Now, the next page, I really don't think any of these are good. I think that the Unsealed Spellbook used to be kind of good because people were using it. And again, I think maybe a Last Stand and Triumph would be kind of interesting here. Or maybe something that looks like a little bit like this, or maybe something that looks like this, or maybe this would be kind of interesting. Maybe even, that, or this, something like that. But at the end of the day, I really just think that this is just something that's for fun. Again, I know Box used to run something with Unsealed Spellbook, but at this point it just doesn't really make that much sense. And I just find it really, going down this tree as a primary is bad because it has such good stat potential for secondary with magical footwear. But I will show you guys a secondary that I do have for inspiration that actually is a little bit different from things that a lot of Riven, and I would say even most Riven players are running right now, is I run sometimes a Future Market and Cosmic Insight if I'm into a really oppressive matchup that I have a really hard time farming in because of the fact that if I farm, they push me off the wave. Maybe something like a early game rumble, something like that. That little bit of gold that you get in debt, that 150, maybe on an awkward back, you get an extra long sword out of it. You get maybe enough to get your Warhammer. Or, you get enough to get the little bit extra stats that might help propel you, because you obviously can't farm as well. So I think something like that wouldn't be too bad. But normally this is the page that I run, this or this. That's the only thing that I really change. Everything else I keep about the same. Until I kind of theory craft a build for Overheal and Bloodline that I've seen Adrian Riven run at times, so it's not like it's a new thing, but there are definitely some builds that you can do there with that, so you can get a little bit creative with it. And I just have to say, guys, if you have any ideas or rune pages or builds that you think are good that I haven't stated here, let me know. I'm just letting you guys know everything that I've seen. So thank you very much for watching the video, and I will be making a builds and matchups guide coming shortly. If you guys need any help with any specific matchups, items, builds, runes, or if you're just trying to learn Riven in general, don't hesitate to send me a message or put a comment down below, and I'll be happy to answer it as quickly as I possibly can. So thank you very much for watching the video. Have a great day, and as always, good luck climbing.